Chapter 96. The Captain of the Neverland and the Pirate King in Zeke's previous life. Hook gritted his teeth and said, "Just you wait, little brother, I'll find Kid's Treasure Island before that arrogant merman and become the Pirate King." Captain Hook, doesn't that have a damn good ring to it? Zeke gave a suitable response to Captain Hook's words and thought about Peter Pan. The Pirate King appears 2 years from now. That's also around the time when Sister Callie goes to subjugate the Pirate King. In this life, he had to protect Callie Draker no matter what. Only then could he maintain a force within the Draker clan to stop Abel. Just then, Hook, slightly drunk, smiled and took something out. "Little brother, take a look at this. This is proof that I, Hook, will claim Captain Kidd's treasure before that Peter Pan bastard and become the Pirate King." What Hook took out was a piece of old parchment. He unfolded the parchment. "This is the map to Captain Kidd's Treasure Island." Zeke, quite curious, looked at the parchment Hook had unfolded. However, most of the contents were erased, and it was written in characters he had never seen before, so he couldn't even tell what it represented. It must be written in code because it's a treasure map. Since even Zeke couldn't understand it, Hook must have shown it to him confidently. But then, absurdly, the system activated on its own. Ancient nautical chart detected scanning and analyzing the nautical chart, analyzing and supplementing the erased parts of the nautical chart and re-editing it, marking the location on the map. Unexpectedly, the system analyzed the nautical chart as soon as it saw it. Captain Hook, unaware of this, continued to chatter excitedly. "No one can read this nautical chart right now. I know it's somewhere in the Sea of Death, but I still don't know the exact location. That's why I'm searching all over this area." While Captain Hook was chattering, the system finished analyzing the nautical chart, and on the map that appeared before Zeke's eyes, it showed the exact coordinates of Treasure Island. Once again, I realized that the system's capabilities are limitless. Zeke had inadvertently obtained the opportunity to become the Pirate King. Just then, a quest window popped up. Achievement Quest Advanced Mission: Find the Forgotten Sea God's Island. No time limit quest mission reward. Title: Sea God's Blessing, Sea God's Treasure, Sea God's Island? It wasn't a nautical chart pointing to Captain Kidd's Treasure Island, but to an ancient ruin. Considering the mission rewards were the Sea God's Blessing and the Sea God's Treasure, it seemed that the legend of becoming the Pirate King by finding this island wasn't entirely false. If Peter Pan found this island and gained the power of the Sea God, I can somewhat understand why Sister Callie was defeated. Judging from the system's activation, it seemed impossible to find the way to this island through ordinary means. Zeke closed the quest window and responded to Hook's words while thinking about the Sea God's Island. "I need to obtain the power of the Sea God before Peter Pan takes over this island." Zeke thought that it would be difficult to take Caruz to the island, so he would have to take Caruz to safety first and then come back. Captain Hook only returned to his ship after finishing the entire box of whiskey that the smugglers had hidden for Zeke, who learned about the Sea God's Island. It was a meeting without any losses. The next day, Zeke and his party loaded up the supplies and set sail again towards the southern continent. True to its name, the Sea of Death was rough with many reefs. Fortunately, the smuggler captain was quite skilled and navigated through the Sea of Death without any problems. They encountered pirate ships a few times, but nothing happened as Zeke and Boris went over and quietly persuaded them to leave. After a week, Zeke and his party finally arrived in the southern continent. However, just before docking at the harbor, the captain asked if they could dock the ship somewhere else. "My lord, do you really have to dock the ship directly at Galpa Harbor? Smugglers like us will be killed as soon as we enter Galpa." Zeke reassured the captain. "Don't worry, I'll guarantee your safety." With Zeke's persuasion, the smuggling ship reached Galpa Harbor. However, Galpa Harbor was in a state of commotion. Rough-looking men were spread all over the harbor. Seeing this, the smugglers were terrified. "My lord, it's the McCain cartel." Although Don Juan was dead, the McCain cartel still boasted strong organization, despite its reduced size. Without answering, Zeke, wearing his wood steel helmet, jumped off the smuggling ship. The cartel members, seeing Zeke, assumed a defensive stance. That was when it happened. "Boss!" Simon and his subordinates were seen running from afar. The cartel members were surprised to see Simon. put away their weapons, stood at attention, and lined up. Simon knelt before Zeke. "Welcome, boss. We've been waiting for you." The smugglers gaped at the sight. Simon Zapatero, the new boss of the McCain cartel and the guardian of the Cusco royalty, who controlled the northern region of the southern continent, was kneeling before Zeke at the same time. The other cartel members also knelt towards Zeke. Zeke approached Simon. "It's been a while, Simon. How have you been?" "Thanks to you, boss." "Did you have any trouble coming here?" "It was a decent voyage. I'm indebted to the captain and crew, so please reward them. I'll compensate them sufficiently in the name of Simon Zapatero." Meanwhile, Boris and Caruz, with their faces covered, disembarked from the ship and immediately boarded the carriage Simon had prepared. Zeke also boarded the carriage, and only after Simon got on did Zeke take off his helmet and say, "Can we move to the portal immediately?" Simon shook his head. "Boss, I'm sorry to say, but the portal in Tawani is currently unavailable." "What do you mean the portal is unavailable?" "The terminal is crawling with Imperial soldiers." Zeke was surprised by Simon's words. "The Imperials have come all the way here?" "I think they anticipated that you would come to the south, boss." Behind Abel Draker was the Siemens clan. They weren't called the Siemens of strategies for nothing. Zeke fell into thought. "We can't keep His Highness in the south. It's such an unstable place, we don't know what might happen." The southern continent was a place teeming with assassins and outlaws. Zeke couldn't stay by Caruz's side and protect him indefinitely. He could prepare to some extent, but it was impossible to stop all the assassins who would come at them with various methods. He had to get to the central continent somehow and place Caruz under Callie Draker's protection. Simon carefully said, "Boss, there's one way." "What is it? Tell me." "We go through the border region, cross the desert, and head to the Holy Kingdom. The Empire's power doesn't reach the Holy Kingdom." Zeke pondered Simon's words. If they couldn't use the portal, they had no choice but to travel by land for now. Once they entered the Holy Kingdom, there would be many ways to get to Midland, whether by land or sea. Zeke looked at Simon and said, "It seems that's the only way for now, but can we pass through the border region, which is a den of outlaws? The Imperial Knights will be guarding that place too. Since it's a lawless zone, we might be able to find a way through if we go up to the northern border region. There's a tunnel that connects to the desert because it's operated illegally. Even if the Imperial Army chases us, their speed will be hindered." It was a method Simon could suggest because he used to be an outlaw. Zeke thought for a moment and nodded. "Okay, let's do as you say." "All right, boss, please rest from your journey at the hideout today, and we'll leave tomorrow." The next day, Zeke and his party changed into southern clothes, mounted their horses, and headed towards Tawani. Since Simon and his subordinates were escorting them, there was no trouble from small fry. The problem started from the border region above Tawani. This area, commonly called the Lawless Zone, was an extraterritorial region consisting of several towns built in the wasteland. The reason this place became a lawless zone was because a huge black market city had formed. Stolen goods, items related to crimes, and money that couldn't reach the door to Republic all flowed into this place, and all sorts of criminals tried to hide their identities, find jobs, or commit other crimes to make money. Naturally, this place became a place where common sense and law didn't apply. If Dorda was a city of glamorous pleasure, this place was a city of desire and pleasure built in the lowest depths. Since it was such a dangerous place, after crossing the wasteland and entering the lawless zone, Simon warned Zeke and his party, "We have to be very careful from here on. Consider everyone but our group an enemy." Zeke nodded at Simon's words. Caruz was a little nervous, but he also seemed quite excited to go to the black market city in the lawless zone, which he had only heard rumors about. Zeke and his party slowly walked towards a place where a fence was made of wire. In the wasteland, there was a checkpoint there, which was one of the entrances to the lawless zone. Simon approached and showed something to the organization members guarding the checkpoint. They whispered among themselves after seeing the card Simon presented, then went inside the checkpoint and contacted someone. Soon, they came back out and handed the card back to Simon. "Things are a bit dangerous these days, so take care of yourselves." Simon received the card and entered the wire fence with his companions. Walking straight down the road, after entering, they saw a small village. Simon said to Zeke, boss, it's better to stay here today. We'll go to the black market city tomorrow, meet the tunnel broker, and move immediately. Zeke nodded. This was a village at the entrance to the lawless zone, so it was relatively less dangerous. The moment they entered the black market city, they had to consider their lives at stake, so it wasn't bad to have some time to prepare. Zeke and his party entered the lodging Simon had arranged and unpacked their luggage. Zeke decided to share a room with Caruz to protect him, but as Zeke was unpacking, Caruz approached him and showed him something. Zeke, look at this. What do you think? Caruz, who had spent quite a long time with Zeke while escaping, now spoke comfortably to him. Zeke also spoke comfortably to Caruz. It's a drawing. Did you draw this, Caruz? I told you I'm an artist. When the drawing is finished, I'll add a poem that matches it, then it'll be complete. A minstrel, is that your dream, Caruz? Caruz put the drawing back in his bosom and said, if I were an ordinary prince, that would be the case, but with a situation like this, I don't know if I can become an ordinary minstrel. I'll probably spend my life on the run or live as an exiled royal. Zeke gave a wry smile at Caruz's self-deprecating remark. Just then, Caruz asked Zeke, what about you, Zeke? Do you have a dream? Zeke was momentarily speechless at Caruz's question. He had told Arthur Draker that his goal was to become the strongest on the continent. His goal was to become the strongest on the continent, take control of the Draker clan, and become the absolute ruler. A dream? Is that a dream? Zeke, who had died and returned to life, was putting all his effort into achieving what he couldn't achieve in the past. He looked at Caruz and said, to become the strongest on the continent, that's what I dreamed of. Caruz nodded at Zeke's words, the strongest on the continent. That certainly won't be easy to achieve. But just then Zeke's senses picked up a suspicious movement. What's this? He told Caruz to be quiet and hide under the bed. Caruz did as Zeke said without arguing. Zeke clung to the wall and used his dragon eye to observe the surroundings. He sensed a suspicious movement from behind the building across the street. This isn't just the movement of ordinary outlaws, these are trained individuals. They could be assassins raised by the cartel, but he could tell they weren't approaching with good intentions. Zeke knocked on the wall of the next room to send a signal. Soon, Boris entered the room. Zeke said to Boris, tell Simon to prepare to leave this place immediately. Okay, boss. After Boris left, Zeke quickly packed his things and was about to leave the room with Caruz. Just as he finished packing and was about to leave the room, whoosh, an arrow flew in through the window. Duck! As soon as he finished speaking, the incoming arrow exploded. Translator Pepto-Bismol Proofreader Max. Chapter 97. Translator Pepto-Bismol Proofreader Max Kwang. The arrows were fitted with magic bombs. Fortunately, Zeke's armor activated its shield, blocking the damage from the explosion. Are you alright, Caruz? Caruz coughed out the dust from his mouth and nodded. Zeke led Caruz out of the room. Boris and Simon were ready and waiting for his orders. Simon, there's a sniper. Protect Caruz. I'll take care of it. Boris and Simon took Caruz and went outside. Zeke immediately went to the window and climbed onto the roof. He expanded his senses to find the sniper. Where is he? Just then, another arrow flew towards Zeke. He drew his sword and split the arrow in two. This time, instead of a bomb, it was poison powder that scattered. However, the poison powder was useless against Zeke, who was immune to all poisons. Zeke identified the sniper's location by tracing the direction the arrow had come from. Rooftop of the building 500 meters to the left, right below the edge. He used Gale technique to dash between the buildings. Arrows rained down on him as he ran. Explosions erupted around him, but Zeke ignored them and ran straight towards the sniper. Quang. Zeke crashed through the building wall and rolled inside. The startled sniper shot an arrow at Zeke. Ting! But the arrow couldn't penetrate Zeke, who was wearing armor with the dragon scale armor skill activated underneath. Zeke charged straight at the sniper. Quang. He struck the sniper with a shoulder charge infused with golden power, sending him crashing into the wall. Kuhuk! Having subdued the sniper in one blow, Zeke grabbed him and interrogated him. Who sent you? The sniper clenched his teeth and tried to commit suicide with poison. But such a method wouldn't work on Zeke. Quaduk. Zeke dislocated the sniper's jaw, opened his mouth, and pulled out the poison-filled molar Diolkik. After putting the jaw back in place, Zeke asked the sniper again. "Speak quickly. Who sent you?" The sniper glared at Zeke and shouted, "The ghosts of favela will haunt you forever." Zeke kicked the sniper in the stomach. "Kuhuk!" Zeke grabbed the sniper's hair and tilted his head back. "Who are you trying to fool? Since when did favela raise snipers? You reek of Salmac. Didn't they tell you to say that when you catch Salmac?" The sniper, his tricks completely seen through by Zeke, was flustered. What kind of person is this? He had seen all sorts of people while working as an assassin, but he had never met anyone like this. Zeke struck the sniper's throat. "Kuhuk! Don't roll your eyes, you bastard. If you're from Salmac, you couldn't have come alone. How many of you are there? Tell me quickly." Before he could even get an answer, Zeke took out a dagger and used the lightning skill Jijijijik. Quiet. Despite being an assassin trained to withstand all kinds of torture, the electric shock caused unbearable pain, like his muscles were contracting. Three. As soon as Zeke heard the assassin's words, he stabbed him in the neck with the dagger and killed him. There was no point in interrogating him further. Salmac assassins never revealed their clients. This is troublesome if Salmac is involved. Salmac was a long-established assassin group based in the desert region. Along with the Scorpion clan, a clan of black mages, they were infamous in the underworld. Zeke exited the building, heightened his senses, and searched for other Salmac assassins. Just then, something caught his senses. It was the direction Simon and his group were escaping with Karuz. The Salmac assassins are after Karuz, as expected. The Empire must have requested the assassination. Zeke chased after the Salmac assassins, leaping over buildings with incredible speed. As if sensing Zeke's pursuit, one of the Salmac assassins stopped and turned around. Shriek. A throwing star flew towards Zeke pack. Zeke caught the throwing star between his fingers. Seeing the blue hue on the blade's surface, it seemed to be coated with poison. Zeke imbued the throwing star with golden power and hurled it back at the assassin. Peek. Cook. Unable to dodge the throwing star, the assassin was hit in the thigh and tumbled onto the rooftop. Zeke immediately approached the assassin and stepped on his neck. Udiduk. With one blow, the assassin's neck was broken. After confirming the assassin's death, Zeke immediately chased after the other assassin. Ping. Quack. Every time an arrow flew, an explosion followed. Boris and Simon's group, riding on horseback with Karuz, couldn't escape the assassin's attacks. Simon shouted to Boris, "Boris, protect the prince. We'll hold them off." Boris nodded and sped up with Karuz. Simon and his men slowed down and searched for the assassin, chasing them from the rooftops. Where the hell is he? Being a high-ranking assassin, he was difficult to spot with the naked eye. Just then, a bead rolled under Simon's feet. Dodge. Quack. An explosion much larger than before erupted. Simon's ears were ringing from the explosion and he couldn't regain his senses due to the tremors that shook the surroundings. He barely managed to steady himself and shouted to his men, "Take care of the wounded. I'll chase after him." Simon drew his dagger and climbed up the wall of the building. As soon as he reached the rooftop, an arrow flew towards him. Pack. He deflected the arrow with his dagger, but a cloud of poisonous powder suddenly spread. Kuhum. Simon, who had inhaled the sudden burst of poison powder, felt his breath becoming short. Damn it. He decided that he had to take down the assassin before he died. Lowering his stance, Simon charged towards the approaching assassin. Whick. As he swung his dagger, the assassin kept his distance and shot arrows. Even though they were both assassins, Salmac's methods were completely different from those of the South. Salak assassins considered it the highest form of assassination to kill their targets without them even realizing they were dying. This was a stark contrast to the Southern style of assassination, where they would confront their targets, inform them of the reason for their death, and brutally kill them. Cook. Simon felt his strength gradually draining away. Just then, something approached. Whick. Blinded by the poison, Simon swung his dagger in the direction he sensed the presence. Teak. But the approaching figure grabbed Simon's arm and threw him to the side. Yuk. Then he forcefully shoved something into Simon's mouth and poured something into his eyes. Heek. His vision and breathing returned in an instant. When he came to, Zeke was looking down at him. "Are you all right, Simon?" "B-boss, I apologize. I must chase after the assassin right away." Zeke shook his head. "I caught the last one." Looking up and glancing around, Simon saw the assassin already captured by Zeke. Zeke and Simon took the assassin and went downstairs. Fortunately, there were only injuries, no casualties. Zeke asked Simon. It seems the Empire has placed a request with Salnak. At the mention of Salak, Simon's expression darkened. If it's Salak, this won't be the end. The black market is practically Salmak's home ground. Zeke nodded. Is there any other route through the border besides the black market? Simon pondered for a moment. There's one, it's a bit further from here, and the exit of that tunnel is close to Ishtar's territory. At the mention of Ishtar, Zeke contemplated for a moment, then nodded. Let's go that way. If it's close to Ishtar's territory, neither the Empire nor Salmak will dare to act recklessly. In the worst-case scenario, Zeke considered crossing Ishtar's territory, passing through the forbidden forest of the Forgotten, and entering the Duchy of Troy. It would take a considerable amount of time, but ensuring Prince Karuz's safety was the priority. Simon instructed his subordinates to return to the cartel with the captured Salmak assassin and the wounded. Thus, the four of them, Zeke, Boris, Simon, and Karuz, decided to traverse the wasteland of the lawless zone. We have enough food and water. Let's depart immediately. Zeke had already amply stocked his inventory with necessities for survival, quickly finishing their preparations. The four men left the village and galloped towards the wasteland. The scorching sun beat down relentlessly, and the barren wasteland stretched endlessly. Karuz, with the weakest stamina, was naturally the first to tire. Ugh. Zeke, shouldn't we rest for a bit? Although Karuz rarely suggested resting first while they were together, the wasteland of the lawless zone was that brutal. Zeke opened the map to find a suitable resting spot. Finally finding a shaded hill, Zeke and his companions took a short break. Zeke took out food and water from his inventory and handed them out. Boris, watching Zeke, remarked, I feel this every time I see it, but Boss's subspace artifact seems to hold a lot of things. Zeke remembered vaguely, explaining his inventory as an ancient relic with spatial magic. As he couldn't reveal its true nature, Zeke replied nonchalantly to Boris's remark. That's why money is good, Boris. Indeed. Boris nodded in agreement with Zeke's words. As they were taking a short rest, they saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance. Zeke and Simon stood up. Wary Zeke used Dragon Eye to examine the approaching group. Are they outlaws? When he described the appearance of the group he saw, Simon's expression hardened. They are famous bounty hunters in the lawless zone. It seems the Empire has spread information about the prince not only to Salmak but also to the outlaws. At Simon's words, Boris took a stand. Karuz, who was behind them, also held his crossbow and kept watch. A dozen people on horseback were seen approaching Zeke's group, weapons drawn. 100,000 gold is right there. Get them. The bounty hunters charged excitedly. Just then, Zeke shouted to Simon and Boris, Close your eyes. Then, he used the flashbang skill towards the bounty hunters' flash. An intense light flashed, attacking the bounty hunters' corneas. Quack! While Zeke protected Karuz, Boris and Simon stepped forward to deal with the bounty hunters. Chwak! As Boris was a blue knight and Simon possessed comparable skills, they could easily handle the outlaws who had lost their sight. After Simon and Boris returned from dealing with all the outlaws, Zeke said, We need to hurry with a bounty of 100,000 gold. Most of the outlaws in the lawless zone will come running. Zeke's party started galloping through the wasteland again. As he anticipated, outlaws chasing them appeared throughout the wasteland. Most of them were small fries, easily dealt with by Boris and Simon. Zeke checked the map while watching Boris and Simon return from handling the outlaws. We still have half a day to go to the tunnel, but I'm not sure if Karuz's stamina will hold up. Karuz was already mentally and physically exhausted. Simon and Boris, who had been constantly on the move without proper sleep, were also in a bad state. Zeke, judging that it would be difficult to move any further, looked for a place to rest. Let's set up camp here. Zeke dug out a space under a large rock and pitched a tent to create a shelter from the sunlight. Karuz, already exhausted, immediately collapsed and fell asleep. Zeke said to Boris and Simon, I'll take the first watch, so get some sleep. Boris and Simon, marveling at Zeke's incredible stamina, lay down next to Karuz and closed their eyes, pretending to be persuaded. Zeke consumed the kraken leg, which he had kept separately. using gluttony to replenish his mental and physical strength and mana. Then he summoned the chimera, Gurub, summoned from Zeke's shadow, seemed excited to be out after a long time, scurrying around restlessly. Gurub, play around here, and if you find anyone suspicious, bite them. If they're not dead, bring them to me. Gurub excitedly ran around the wasteland. But then, quack! Not long after being released, Gurub brought back a suspicious person. Having bitten them, Zeke examined the person Gurub had brought. As ordered, the person was still alive. Zeke checked the suspicious person's belongings, and he discovered the person's identity. It's one of the Empire's hounds. Translator, Pepto-Bismol Proofreader, Max. Chapter 98. Translator, Pepto-Bismol Proofreader, Max. The hound bitten by Gurub soon breathed its last. Zeke wondered why the Empire's hounds were roaming around this area. It's possible they're chasing Karuz, but there could also be ancient ruins here. The Mad Emperor of the Rom Empire was scouring the entire continent for any ancient ruins he could find. Zeke wasn't sure if Consul Julius had the authority to command the hounds, but if they were indeed pursuing Zeke's group, crossing the border would become even more difficult. Soon, Boris and Simon woke up and were startled to see the hound's corpse. Simon, are there any ancient ruins near here? Simon nodded at his words. Yes, there are quite a few hidden dungeons near the border. Zeke was somewhat relieved by Simon's answer, but he couldn't let his guard down. The hounds were also knights of the Empire. There was no telling when they might be fully mobilized to cast a dragnet. It's best to get out of here as soon as possible. Zeke woke Karuz up and immediately moved towards the tunnel. The tunnel Simon mentioned, which could be used to cross the border, was an old smuggling route. When Ishtar hadn't issued the expulsion order, the cartel used to send all of their soma through here. Back then, it wasn't the syndicate, but outlaws who acted as guides for the route. Simon knew about this tunnel because he had helped transport the cartel's drugs through here when he was an outlaw. We're almost there. A small village made of earthen walls could be seen beyond the wasteland. Zeke entered the village, cautiously observing his surroundings. Simon went deeper into the village, saying he would meet with a broker. Zeke and his party entered a restaurant that Simon had guided them to. Karuz, sitting at the table, slumped over and said, "Ugh, I'd like to eat something warm, not just dry rations." He was tired of eating only dry food while crossing the wasteland. Soon, the food they ordered arrived, just as Karuz had wished. Although the spices were strong, the food was edible. Karuz, throwing aside his imperial dignity, devoured the food voraciously. He's 100 times better than those nobles who fuss about their food. Zeke thought it was fortunate that Karuz was an easygoing royal. After finishing their meal and resting for a while, Zeke felt an unsettling atmosphere forming around them. This isn't good. As he expected, a group of men entered the restaurant. Judging from the shape of their swords, they seemed to be from the central continent. They're hounds. It seemed the hounds, who had been searching for ruins in the area, had entered the village to find a meal. Zeke gestured to Boris and Karuz to cover their faces and look away, just as they were about to quietly get up from their seats. "Hey, you." Suddenly, someone called out to Zeke. Glancing back, he saw that it wasn't the hounds who had just entered, but one of the outlaws sitting in the restaurant. Approaching Zeke, "I haven't seen your face before. Where are you from?" Zeke, with his face covered, spoke to the outlaw in the southern dialect. "I'm from the syndicate, and where do you belong?" At the mention of the syndicate, the outlaw flinched for a moment, then he grinned and approached Zeke again. "These days, everyone claims to be from the syndicate. You little punk, did you think I'd be scared by that?" He was clearly just a thug who preyed on travelers entering the village. Zeke was more concerned about the hounds sitting at the inner table. "I don't want to cause a scene. What do you want?" The outlaw, with a confident expression, said, "Show me everything you have. I'll see how much you offer and think about what the boss will do." Zeke nodded as if he had no choice. "All right, most of my belongings are on my horse. Let's go there." The outlaw happily followed Zeke to the stable. Zeke threw one of the bags hanging on his horse to the outlaw. "Ooh, this is quite heavy. Let's see what's inside." Before he could finish his sentence, Zeke struck the back of his neck, knocking him unconscious. He led the horse towards where Karuz and Boris had already exited. But the hounds, who had been eating quietly, were now approaching Zeke. "Hey, you, wait a minute." Zeke pondered the hound's words for a moment, then approached him with his face still covered. "What can I do for you?" "I heard you were from the syndicate earlier. What brings smugglers all the way out here?" Fortunately, it seemed they hadn't been discovered. Zeke slowly fabricated a story. The road to the central continent was suddenly blocked, so we came here to detour through the desert and go up north. One of the hounds looked at Zeke suspiciously, then approached Karuz, who had a different aura than the other two. You take off your robe. The hound reached out to remove Karuz's robe. It was then thud. Zeke took out a dagger and threw it at the hound's hand, and he immediately drew his Wunschel sword and beheaded the hound in front of him. Slice. The hounds were momentarily stunned as their comrade was killed in an instant. Get them. Boris, who was next to him, drew his sword and stabbed the shouting hound from behind. Zeke threw a dagger at the hound trying to escape. 3 hounds died in the blink of an eye in the restaurant. Boris approached Zeke. Boss. It's only a matter of time before we're discovered. Let's abandon the horses and go to where Simon is. We need to get through the tunnel quickly. Zeke took Karuz and ran to where Simon was, but just then, other outlaws started chasing Zeke's group. 100,000 gold is getting away. It seemed the bounty hunters had barged in here as well. Zeke used the flashbang skill towards the pursuing outlaws. Flash. Kayak. The outlaws exposed to the flashbang rolled around on the market floor just as they were about to cross the market and head towards the tavern Simon had mentioned. Boss. Simon ran towards Zeke. What happened? The bounty hunters are already chasing us. The hounds caught our scent too. Can we enter the tunnel right now? We can enter, but there's no guide. I can find the way, so let's hurry. Zeke followed Simon and ran towards the tunnel. Since the village had originally been built around this tunnel, the entrance to the tunnel was closer than expected. The entrance was inside an old well. A guard stood watch in front of it. When Simon showed the token he had received from the broker, the guard nodded and told them to enter the well. They entered the well one by one, starting with Simon. Whoosh. Looking down, they saw a narrow tunnel leading down from the bottom of the well. It was so shabby that it was hard to believe that just a few years ago, drugs from the south had been transported through this tunnel to the central continent. Zeke turned on the map and examined the tunnel route. I'll take the lead, Simon. Protect Karuz from the rear. Thanks to the map, Zeke could navigate the complicated tunnel without getting lost. Soon, the narrow path ended and a fairly wide passage appeared. Simon said to Zeke, Boss, if we go straight this way, we can cross the border. Zeke's party walked along the long tunnel path. It was unbelievable how people could have built such a long tunnel. After walking for a while, there was a loud noise from behind. They're over there. Apparently, there was more than one entrance to the tunnel. Outlaws with weapons drawn were chasing Zeke's group. Simon, observing them, said to Zeke, the man in front is called the Yellow Wind Messenger, a fairly renowned outlaw. Simon, protect Karuz. Boris, follow me. Zeke immediately drew his behemoth sword and charged forward. Weak. He had to deal with the outlaws using only swordsmanship, as using powerful skills risked collapsing the tunnel. Zeke swung his sword. Thwack. The Yellow Wind Messenger, struck by Zeke's sword, flew back and crashed into the wall. Boris also wielded his sword against the outlaws, taking on several at once. Zeke shouted to Boris, Boris, cover your ears and step back. At Zeke's words, Boris rolled back. Simultaneously, Zeke used the skill Discord, Jithring. A strange sound resonated around Zeke, and the outlaws, in agony, retreated. Discord disrupted their balance and magic, although it was a skill Zeke used from their perspective. It seemed like magic. Zeke's sword swept through the bewildered outlaws. Kuhuk! Even the renowned Yellow Wind Messenger was no match for Zeke, being far weaker from the start, and the rest were mere small fries. Zeke personally beheaded the Yellow Wind Messenger, and Boris finished off the remaining outlaws. Sheathing his sword, Zeke said, Boris, let's hurry. Zeke's party quickly moved further into the tunnel, however. The outlaws continued to attack them relentlessly. Chwak. Zeke's sword cut through the outlaws, clearing a path. The tunnel floor was soaked with the blood of the outlaws. Boris, who had been swinging his sword continuously, seemed quite exhausted, but Zeke, thanks to his infinite stamina, could continue to fight them off. It would have been a disaster if I didn't have infinite stamina. Zeke handed out health potions to his companions and continued towards the tunnel exit. And when they finally reached the tunnel exit, Zeke felt an ominous presence. This is magical energy. As expected, magic flew in from outside the exit. Jijijik. Quack-quack-quack-quang. Lightning and fireballs rained down on Zeke's group. Get down! Zeke shielded Karuz and activated dragon scale armor. When the explosions ended, He got up and said to Simon, "Protect Karuz. I'll go out and take care of the mages." Zeke, equipped with his armor, dashed out of the tunnel. "He's out! Attack!" As soon as Zeke emerged, the mages began to bombard him with attacks, perhaps because there were all sorts of people among the outlaws. Battle mages were also a common sight. Fireballs, lightning, and energy bolts poured down just like before, but the shield activated, automatically defending against the magic wung. As soon as the shield's effect ended, Zeke ran towards the mages with his sword. Then, he stretched out his hand and used the magic reflection skill. As the mana field distorted, the mages were inevitably flustered as their magic casting was disrupted. What's happening? Zeke immediately swung his sword and defeated the mages. After quickly finishing them off and looking around, he saw the outlaws, who had been waiting behind the mages, were bewildered. Those bastards! They said they were mages from Delphoa, but it was all a lie. The battle mages Zeke had killed seemed to be deserters from the Delphoa magic battalion. He took his sword and swept away all the outlaws who had been waiting. Phew! Even though he had infinite stamina, Zeke had his limits. He, too, was starting to feel fatigue. He hadn't been able to properly utilize gluttony because they had been moving quickly, so he couldn't resolve his mental exhaustion. It would be even more dangerous if I suddenly lose consciousness. Zeke signaled his party to come out. Boris brought the horses that the outlaws had been riding. Simon said to Zeke, "Boss, if we ride for about 2 days, there's a village we can stop by before entering the Forest of the Forgotten, near Ishtar's territory. It would be better to go there, reorganize, and then enter the Duchy of Troy along the outskirts of the forest. That would be preferable to entering the desert region." "All right, let's change the route." It was a more roundabout way, but with even Salmak targeting Karuz, entering their home ground, the desert region, was practically suicidal. Just as Zeke's party was about to leave the border area on horseback, they felt something fiercely chasing them from behind. Zeke used Dragon Eye to enhance his vision and examine the pursuers. A curse word immediately escaped his lips. "Damn it, the Empire's hounds are on our tail." It seemed they had been caught because of the 3 he killed at the restaurant. Zeke's party spurred their horses faster, however. The horses they had taken from the outlaws were no match for the Empire's military horses. Soon, the hounds caught up to Zeke's group. Whoosh! One of the hounds fired a crossbow. Zeke, who was at the rear, swung his sword and deflected the arrow. He shouted towards Simon, "Keep going! Once we get closer to Ishtar's territory, those hounds won't be able to follow us." Zeke fell slightly behind the others and threw daggers at the pursuing hounds, biting. The hound's speed gradually decreased due to the obstruction of the daggers infused with gold power, but then another cloud of dust rose from the side. Another group of outlaws was approaching them from behind. Translator, Pepto-Bismol Proofreader, Max. Chapter 99. Translator, Pepto-Bismol Proofreader, Max, these crazy bastards. Zeke gritted his teeth as he saw the outlaws popping up endlessly like cockroaches. He urged his horse forward and rejoined Karuz and the others. Zeke cast an area of effect buff and activated healing factor, Wung. Everyone, including the horses, recovered temporarily due to the urgent situation. The others didn't notice and just continued to gallop forward. Just then, a massive sandstorm began to blow in front of them in the wasteland. Simon shouted, "Boss, it's Ishtar's territory ahead. Keep going." Zeke's party entered the sandstorm. The pursuing outlaws, recognizing Ishtar's territory, gradually stopped their pursuit. However, the hounds did not cease their chase. They also dashed into the sandstorm. Zeke gritted his teeth as he watched them. Those persistent bastards. Zeke had nothing but bad experiences with the hounds, even in his past life. He shouted to Simon, "I'll take care of them. You guys keep going without stopping." Zeke turned his horse around and charged towards the hounds in the sandstorm. The wind blew more fiercely, making it difficult to see clearly. However, Zeke, using the Dragon Eye skill, could see the hounds through the sandstorm, about 20 purple knights. There seems to be a blue knight mixed in as well. How can the Empire produce so many knights? The Draca clan surpassed the Empire in the number of blue and black knights, but the Empire had an overwhelmingly larger number of purple knight level troops. Zeke had even encountered a group of hounds in his past life that consisted entirely of blue knights with a red knight mixed in, Hung. Zeke unleashed a gale towards the charging hounds using the wind force field Quaqua. The gale, mixed with the swirling sandstorm, swept over the hounds. The commander leading the hound unit shouted, "Damn it! That bastard is using magic." To the people of this era who didn't know about elemental sword, it undoubtedly looked like he was using magic. Zeke cut down the hounds who had fallen from their horses amidst the gale, kayak. Blinded by the sandstorm, the hounds couldn't avoid Zeke's sword. Just then, a sword flash gleamed behind Zeke. Hung. A blue knight swung his aura blade, whoosh. Zeke dodged the sword with phantom, then he immediately concentrated mana throughout his body and charged into the knight's horse with a body slam, crash. Heeing. The horse, struck by Zeke's attack, toppled over. The knight riding the horse immediately got up and charged at Zeke again, Hyatt. Zeke, with his sword imbued with aura, deflected the hound's sword, which was enveloped in an aura blade, cook. His wrist stinging from the tremendous shock, the blue knight retreated instead of attacking again. He shouted to the other hounds, "Catch him. I'll chase after the prince." Then he quickly turned around, mounted another hound's horse, and galloped towards Karuz. Zeke, in his urgency, had no choice but to assume the Dragon Slayer-style horseman stance, Wung. A crescent-shaped aura shot out from his sword, Chwadok. The blue knight, galloping on horseback, was struck by the crescent aura Zeke had unleashed from behind and fell from his horse. He didn't die, probably because he was wearing armor underneath, cook. That bastard! He's a Draker. The hound recognized Zeke's Dragon Slayer style instantly. Zeke clenched his teeth. If even one of them escaped here, there was a risk of his identity being exposed. Zeke concentrated and raised Bahamut, Wung. Aura surged from the sword. Zeke's body moved like a gale. Dragon Slayer art. Applied form gale technique, wind blade like the wind transforming into a blade. Sharp sword attacks poured out from Zeke's body as he ran like the wind. Chwalalarak. Weaving through the hounds, Zeke's sword, becoming one with the wind, beheaded them, pierced their hearts, and severed their limbs. Quayak! The hounds couldn't defend against Zeke's attacks, which had become one with the sandstorm, after a gust of wind passed. All the hounds lay fallen. Zeke approached the blue knight, who was still alive, with his sword raised. The blue knight gritted his teeth as he looked at Zeke. "Damn Drakers! The Empire's flames will burn you all." Slice! Before he could finish his sentence, Zeke's sword beheaded him. Zeke contemplated how to dispose of the knights' bodies, which bore traces of the Dragon Slayer style, then gathered them in one place and placed his hand on them. Power of decay. He tried using the power he had gained from consuming the ancient dragon species. Then, starting from the body touched by Zeke's hand, decay slowly began to set in as the bodies decayed at a rapid pace, and in the end, even the armor and swords they were wearing were completely corroded and scattered with the sandstorm. Zeke was astonished to see the bodies disappear in an instant. So this is the power of decay. If used well, it could be a formidable weapon. Zeke disposed of the hounds' bodies with the power of decay, mounted a surviving warhorse, and galloped towards Karuz and his party. He quickly moved through the raging sandstorm towards his companions, and when he almost reached them, something felt strange. "What's that?" Simon and Boris were collapsed, bleeding, with swords in their hands, and Karuz was pointing a crossbow at someone. Zeke jumped off his horse and activated Gale technique. Whoosh! Zeke swung his sword at the enemy approaching Karuz, quaching. The enemy deflected Zeke's aura-infused sword with a dagger. Zeke stood in front of Karuz and pointed his sword at the enemies. The two people standing before Zeke had slender figures, wore clothes made of plain cloth, and their faces were covered with chatters. There was only one place with such unique attire, Ishtar's mystics. Zeke threw a potion to Simon and asked, "What happened?" Simon applied the potion to his wounds, then used the rest on Boris, who had deeper injuries, before answering, "They suddenly appeared and attacked us." Zeke, with his sword still pointed, asked the Ishtar mystics, "Why did you attack us?" One of them stepped forward and said, "You have violated Ishtar's expulsion order and entered our territory." It was an unspoken rule that when the Ishtar clan issued an expulsion order, no one could enter their territory. Zeke glared at them and said, "So you're saying you attack without even listening to our circumstances? We prioritize the clan's expulsion order above all else. Those who ignore the sacred sandstorm's warning and enter cannot have good intentions." There is only the judgment bestowed by the Earth God. The Ishtar clan was known for being stubborn and inflexible, so there was no point in further conversation. Zeke took a deep breath and slowly spoke. Ancient Eastern words flowed from his mouth. In the name of the Earth God, I wish to determine the validity of the transgression against the expulsion order through an honorable duel. The Ishtar warrior was surprised by Zeke's words. Why you? How? How do you know the sacred Earth law? The Ishtar clan strictly adhered to their long-standing clan laws. Among the laws of the Ishtar clan, there was one that was prioritized above all else: sacred judgment by warriors' duel. The Earth God they worshipped was also the god of warriors. Therefore, there was a law stating that when someone committed a sin or a problem arose, an honorable duel between warriors would be held, and the result would reveal the Earth God's judgment, since Ishtar was the most secluded place on the continent. Naturally, no one outside knew about this law. However, Zeke knew about Ishtar's law due to his experience in a special organization in his past life. The Ishtar warriors were visibly flustered by the sudden mention of the warrior's law. Just then, the person who had been quietly watching from behind stepped forward. The other warriors were surprised. My lady, are you going to participate in the duel? The warrior nodded and stood before Zeke. The Ishtar warrior soon held uniquely shaped daggers in both hands. The blades were wavy, like ripples in water. Zeke knew those daggers were unique weapons of the Ishtar clan. To think they're using those daggers. It seems they're a warrior of considerable status within the clan. Ishtar, one of the three transcendent clans, they were a clan of mystics, different from the knights of the central continent. They strengthened their bodies using mystic arts, and then displayed a unique fighting style that combined martial arts, hidden weapons, and poison techniques. As Zeke was recalling information about Ishtar, the Ishtar warrior took a stance with their daggers. Zeke also took the Dragon Slayer stance with Bahamut. He couldn't let his guard down for even a moment when, facing an Ishtar mystic whoosh, the Ishtar warrior charged towards Zeke, first patching. The warriors swung their daggers with animalistic agility. Zeke was pushed back by the force imbued in the daggers. What tremendous power! Zeke also concentrated his powers in his sword and clashed with the warrior's daggers. Clang, clang. The sound of metal colliding rang out as the sword and daggers clashed. The warriors' attacks were relentless, wielding their daggers in a dance-like flurry of movements and displaying sharp hidden weapon techniques. Zeke also swung his sword with all his might. Their strong, central continent swordsmanship had evolved to be optimized for aura cultivation. However, the Ishtar clan's mystic arts focused on efficient killing techniques. As a result, the warriors of the Ishtar clan were all undoubtedly experts in killing. They were specialists in killing on a different level from mere assassins patching. With the ceaseless barrage of attacks, Zeke couldn't find a proper opening to use the Dragon Slayer art. Zeke stepped back and changed his stance. Phew! Taking a breath and assuming the elemental sword stance, Zeke activated the water force field, whoosh. Among the techniques he had learned from Kaiser, the water force field was the most difficult to master. Zeke's sword moved as smoothly as flowing water patching. The Ishtar warrior was taken aback by the sudden change in the flow of the sword. Unlike the knights of the central continent, they couldn't find the timing to use their aura, so they focused on defense. But now Zeke was wielding a completely different swordsmanship, tralalalak. Although the speed was slower than the sword Zeke had been wielding until now, it was even more flawless than before. The Ishtar warrior felt the flow of their sword dance being disrupted by Zeke's sword. In the end, the Ishtar warrior, unable to properly execute their hidden weapon techniques due to Zeke's sword constantly piercing through the gaps in their movements, had to retreat, weeing. A sandstorm blew between Zeke and the Ishtar warrior. They glared at each other, unmoving. They appeared to be standing still, but in reality, a fierce exchange of attacks and defenses was taking place. Another Ishtar warrior, observing this, was astonished. Oh my God! To think there was a warrior who could fight my lady on equal footing. She was called the greatest genius in the history of the Ishtar clan. Even the most skilled warriors in the clan were no match for her sword dance. No one in the clan could defeat her in martial arts, so it was surprising to see an outsider who had invaded their territory fighting her as an equal. It was then whoosh. The two dashed towards each other simultaneously. Zeke's sword swept through the sandstorm, drawing a massive wave, hooing. The Ishtar warrior, running towards the wave-like sword attack, spun their body with their daggers and rode the wave tralalalak. The warrior, riding the wave, smoothly spun their body once more, leaped into the air, and unleashed their hidden weapon techniques towards Zeke. A whirlwind kick carrying immense power descended upon Zeke. Quack-quack-quack-wang. A massive explosion erupted where Zeke was standing, sending sand flying in all directions. Translator Pepto-Bismol Proofreader Max. Chapter 100. Translator Pepto-Bismol Proofreader Max Who. The sandstorm subsided, the figures of the two were revealed, and surprisingly, Zeke had Bahamut pointed at the Ishtar warrior's neck. Zeke said to the warrior, "It seems the Earth God has given their judgment." The Ishtar warrior silently nodded at Zeke's words. When Zeke withdrew his sword, the warrior slowly got up. As the two emerged from the pit, another Ishtar warrior rushed over with a surprised voice. "My lady!" The tall Ishtar warrior who had fought Zeke conveyed something with hand gestures. The approaching warrior's expression then turned to one of shock. "Am my lady lost?" They seemed quite surprised. Zeke sheathed his sword and said, "The Earth God has given their judgment. You can no longer accuse us of violating the expulsion order, so open the way. We must go to the central continent as soon as possible." The tall warrior then gestured again, conveying something to the other warrior. The shorter warrior was once again surprised. "Why, you're inviting them to the clan?" Even Zeke, who was standing next to them, was surprised by those words. Was it 150 years ago that the Ishtar clan last invited guests? That's how closed off the Ishtar clan was. Then the shorter warrior said to Zeke, "My lady says she will open a portal for you to move quickly to the central continent, so follow me." Zeke was once again surprised by those words. A portal? Does the Ishtar clan possess its own portal? The short warrior didn't answer Zeke's question. Just then, the tall warrior gestured for Zeke to follow them. After some thought, Zeke said to Simon and Boris, "They don't seem hostile, so let's follow them for now." From his experience in his past life, Zeke knew that the Ishtar clan valued their laws and the Earth God's judgment above all else. Zeke helped the severely injured Boris onto a horse and followed the Ishtar warriors on foot with Simon and Karuz. Karuz was excited with a strange thrill. "Zeke, to think we can actually visit the Ishtar clan, we're really lucky." "I'm glad you think so." Karuz seemed oddly carefree despite almost dying. As they passed through the harsh sandstorm and delved deeper, they entered a desert area instead of a wasteland. The sight of the vast desert with its white star sand created a mystical atmosphere. The Ishtar warriors headed into the desert. Zeke turned on his map and recorded the Ishtar warriors' route strangely. Even though they seemed to be walking straight ahead, the route marked on the map was erratic. Is this a mystery of the desert? It seemed like there was a path that only the Ishtar clan knew. It was then. Although there had been nothing but empty desert just moments ago, something appeared in the distance. "Oh!" Karuz exclaimed from beside him. He was excited at the prospect of seeing the main house of the Ishtar clan, which he had only heard of in stories. Just then, the shorter warrior snapped, "Outsiders cannot enter this place no matter what they do, so don't wander the desert trying to find this place again." As Zeke had expected, there seemed to be a special way to enter the main house. Zeke and his party slowly entered the Ishtar city built in the middle of the desert. "Oh my God! There's such a big city in the middle of the desert." Karuz continued to express his admiration as soon as he entered the city, the Ishtar city, with its completely different atmosphere from the central continent, looked more similar to the Eastern Empire style. Most people were wearing plain clothes and had their faces covered with chatters. Only those who weren't followers of the faith had their faces uncovered, and they looked like central continent people. The Ishtar clan are all fervent believers in the Earth God. It seems only those who aren't followers are showing their faces. He had expected a very solemn and quiet atmosphere in this closed-off city, but he was surprised that it wasn't much different from any other city. The market was abundant with goods and bustling with activity. Zeke was curious how such goods entered this isolated and independent city. They probably won't tell me even if I ask. Zeke's party followed the Ishtar warriors, sightseeing the market and heading towards the main palace in the city center. When they reached the main palace, the gatekeepers guarding the entrance became wary upon seeing Zeke's party, who were outsiders. The shorter warrior then said to the gatekeepers, "They are my lady's guests. I will report to her directly." The gatekeepers bowed respectfully and returned to their original positions. Unlike the city, the inside of the palace was, as expected, very quiet and solemn. The people walking around made no sound, and there were hardly any signs of human presence within the palace. It was like looking at the scenery of a monastery. The shorter warrior said to Zeke's party, "I will guide you to your rooms, so please rest there for a while. We will decide what to do after reporting to the elders of the clan." It seemed they couldn't use the portal immediately. Zeke's party entered the rooms guided by another attendant. As soon as they entered the room, Zeke laid Boris down and checked his condition thanks to the potion. He was no longer in critical condition. Zeke took out an ancient potion from his inventory. It was an item far more effective than a regular potion. He sprinkled the potion on Boris's wounds and had him drink the rest. He could have healed him quickly with healing, but he was reluctant to show his healing talent in front of others, so he used the potion instead. "Ugh, Boris, how are you feeling?" "Boss, I'm dying." "You're not dead yet, so stop exaggerating." Boris slowly sat up. "Ugh, but where are we?" "The main palace of Ishtar." "Huh." Boris was surprised and looked around cautiously. Zeke reassured him, "It's all right. We've been invited as guests of the Ishtar clan, so you can relax." Despite Zeke's words, Boris couldn't let his guard down. Knowing they were in the heart of the Ishtar clan, who were experts in assassination mystic arts. Just then, servants entered and prepared a meal. The food was simple, like monastery food, but it was light and brought out the natural flavors of the ingredients. After finishing the meal, Zeke drank the tea that the servant had brought. This is a flavor I've never tasted before. Does the Ishtar clan cultivate their own tea?" The servant nodded at Zeke's words. "You have a deep knowledge of tea. This is made by improving a variety that grows in the desert region. It's a tea that can only be tasted here." Zeke nodded and savored the tea's aroma. It was as if the precious Eastern tea's fragrance had been concentrated many times over, yet it wasn't overpowering, giving him great satisfaction. "I wonder if they sell it as a local specialty in the market. I want to buy some and take it with me." Zeke slowly savored the tea he was tasting for the first time. Zeke regained his composure and looked around at his companions. Karuz was taking out a small sketchbook and drawing the scenery of the Ishtar city. He had seen Zeke, looking at Karuz, said, "If you leak that carelessly, Ishtar's mystics might come looking for you, Karuz." Karuz was so startled by those words that he hiccuped, then quietly closed his sketchbook. He then closed his eyes and tried to engrave the city's scenery in his mind. It was then someone entered the room. It was the two warriors who had brought Zeke's party to the palace. The shorter warrior, abandoning her previous overbearing attitude, bowed politely and said, "The elders of the clan have officially invited you as guests. There will be a banquet for the guests this evening, so please be sure to attend." Zeke rose from his seat and bowed to the warriors, saying, "We are pleased to accept the Ishtar clan's invitation. May the earth god's blessings be with the protectors of the desert." The shorter warrior replied, "May the earth god's blessings be with the travelers of the desert. Please forgive my previous rudeness. My name is Ezge Ishtar, and this is Yellen Ishtar." Zeke looked at Yellen and said, "It seems Yellen Ishtar is undergoing a vow of silence." Yellen nodded slightly at his words. Zeke said to the two, "My name is Zeke Draker." Yellen and Ezge were surprised. "D. Draker? Oh my goodness." Yellen and Ezge looked at Zeke with curiosity. "Why are you so surprised?" Ezge said in a dubious voice. "Well, I heard that Drakers all have horns on their heads, sharp teeth, and when they laugh, they always laugh like demons." Kehi. Zeke, with a dumbfounded expression, retorted, "In the central continent, they say that the Ishtar clan drinks poison like water with every meal." Eske exclaimed in indignation, "How can we drink poison with every meal? Do you know how expensive that is?" We barely drink it once a day, oh, but my lady might drink it with every meal. Anyway, the point was that they did drink it. Zeke let out a small laugh at the unexpected remark. Having finished the necessary conversation, Esge, checking Zeke's head for horns until the very end, was dragged out by Yellen. Simon, watching this, chuckled. I thought the Ishtar clan was a place with no blood or tears, but it seems like a place where people live after all. Zeke nodded, indeed, but why are there rumors that Drakers have horns on their heads? And that they laugh like Kahi. Is there anyone who laughs like that? Karuz, who was next to them, chimed in. Zeke, that's a metaphor. It's a figurative expression that the Draka clan is like demons. The Draka clan has made a lot of enemies and has a ruthless side, you know. Right, thanks for the kind explanation, Karuz. Karuz looked pleased with Zeke's words. As evening came, the attendants handed Zeke's party clothes made of plain cloth. Boris, who hadn't yet recovered from his injuries, decided to stay in the room, and Simon stayed behind to watch over him. Only Karuz and Zeke, excited to be invited to the Ishtar clan banquet, changed into the plain clothes and followed the attendant to the banquet hall. In the banquet hall, a large round table was prepared and people dressed in plain clothes were sitting. Around it, Yellen and Esge, who had invited Zeke, greeted them and guided them to the round table. Zeke and Karuz awkwardly sat down at the round table. Just then, one of the people sitting at the table slowly rose from their seat, although their face was covered. A clear and elegant voice resonated. We have guests visiting our clan after 153 years. As the head of the clan, I want to convey this joy to the Earth God. Then everyone clasped their hands and offered their gratitude to the Earth God. The head of the clan said to Zeke, Sir Zeke Draker, who has found our clan under the guidance of the Earth God, we welcome you as a guest of Ishtar. Please rise from your seat and offer words of blessing for this wondrous encounter. Zeke slowly rose from his seat. Then he spoke in ancient Eastern tongue. The Earth God, who governs mystery and wonder, has arranged this meeting. We offer our gratitude for their wisdom and divine power, and we wish to engrave the order of the law, which is above all else. The Ishtar clan members were impressed by Zeke's fluent ancient Eastern language and formal congratulatory speech. They nodded with satisfaction and looked at Zeke. When Zeke finished speaking and sat down, the head of the clan said, Since it is a joyous occasion, let us all remove our chatters and welcome our guests. Then all the Ishtar clan members excitedly removed their chatters. Zeke and Karuz were shocked to see the faces of the Ishtar people. They're all so beautiful. Even the Graham clan, known for their beauty in the central continent, couldn't compare to the Ishtar clan. The people had various hair colors and some had white skin while others had dark skin. However, they all had delicate features and were handsome or beautiful. Judging from their appearance alone, it was hard to imagine that this was the Ishtar clan, famous for their assassination mystic arts. Zeke turned his head and looked at Yellen, who had fought him in the duel, her mystical emerald. Hair flowed like waves and her face was like a perfect sculpture made of marble. Karuz also gaped at Yellen. However, Zeke was shocked for a different reason. He had spotted Yellen's pointy, long ears, an elf. Translator, Pepto-Bismol proofreader, Max.